This is the Shroud of Turin. It's a linen cloth that may have wrapped the body of Jesus Christ after his crucifixion. This has been a hugely controversial artifact because it seems to show an imprint of Jesus' face. But does it really? And if so, who do you think it is? Let me tell you everything you need to know about this strange artifact. There's no doubt that this is a tremendously important piece of cloth. After all, many Christians believe it's one of the most sacred relics in existence. It is said to have been present at the crucifixion of Jesus and then used for the burial of his body after he died. So it makes sense that there would be an imprint of his face left behind on the cloth. However, this is only the beginning of the story. The shroud was not always famous. For centuries, it sat in a French church unnoticed until it started to gain popularity during the Middle Ages. Many people began to wonder if the shroud could really be the same cloth that was used to wrap Jesus' body. Was this just a random piece of cloth that had been donated to the church and then forgotten about? Or was this really something incredibly special? The truth is that nobody knows where it came from. It wasn't even mentioned in the Bible. We don't know who made it or when it was created. All we know is that it suddenly appeared in a church in France and everybody was stunned by its appearance. Some people believed it was a miracle, while others thought it was a hoax. Over the years, scientists have tried to uncover the truth behind the shroud, but their findings have been inconclusive. Some believe that the image is real, while others insist it's a fake. So what exactly do we know about this mysterious artifact? What does science have to say about it? And what do you think? Let me tell you everything you need to know about the mysterious shroud. First, let's take a look at some of the biblical facts surrounding the shroud. As you may already know, the shroud is a long piece of linen cloth that is believed to have wrapped the body of Jesus after his crucifixion. According to the Bible, after Jesus was crucified, his body was taken down from the cross and placed in a tomb. This was done by Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the Sanhedrin, who was not a fan of what the other Jewish leaders were doing. He asked permission to take Jesus' body and bury it, which was granted. Then he took the body, wrapped it in a shroud, and placed it in a tomb. However, there are a few things about this story that are not entirely clear. For example, the Bible doesn't say anything about what happened to the shroud after Jesus' body was buried. Some people believe that it was kept by Joseph of Arimathea, while others believe it was lost forever. There is also some debate over whether or not Jesus' body was actually wrapped in a shroud at all. After all, the word shroud is not mentioned in the Bible. Instead, it was wrapped in a linen cloth, which could refer to a variety of different types of fabric. Despite these uncertainties, the shroud has become one of the most iconic artifacts in Christian history. Many Christians believe that it is the actual cloth that was used to wrap Jesus' body, and they revere it as such. However, there is no concrete evidence to support this claim. Now, let's move on to some of the historical facts surrounding the shroud. As we mentioned earlier, the shroud was not always famous. For centuries, it sat in a French church unnoticed until it started to gain popularity during the Middle Ages. One of the first people to write about the shroud was a French historian named Jacques Le Goff. In his 1832 book, he described the shroud as a piece of linen cloth that had been preserved for 18 centuries and was still in good condition. He claimed that the image of Jesus on the shroud was so realistic that it looked as though it had been painted by a master artist. Of course, not everyone believed Le Goff's story. Many people thought that he was making the whole thing up for attention. However, he was not the only one who saw the shroud. In fact, there were many other people over the years who had seen it and claimed that it was real. Despite all of this, the shroud remained in obscurity until 1978, when it was put on display in a museum in Italy. Millions of people came to see the shroud, and many of them believed that it was the real deal. However, this was not the only time that the shroud was put on display. In 1993, it was shown again, this time in a church in Washington, D.C. This was a huge event and many world leaders came to see it. Of course, security was extremely tight and only a few people were allowed to actually touch the shroud. However, those who saw it claimed that it was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. In addition to these 2 times that the shroud was put on display, there have been several other times when small groups of people have been able to see it. However, the shroud is so fragile that it cannot be displayed often. It is currently being kept in a museum in Italy, and it is only shown to the public once a year. Finally, let's talk about some of the scientific facts surrounding the shroud. As we mentioned earlier, scientists have tried to get to the bottom of the shroud mystery. They want to know if the image of Jesus is real or if it's a fake. One of the first people to study the shroud was a physicist named John Jackson. In 1978, he used a device called a reflectograph to analyze the shroud. His findings were shocking. He claimed that the image of Jesus was not painted on the shroud, but rather it was impressed into the fibers of the cloth. This means that the image is not on the surface of the shroud, but rather it is actually part of the shroud itself. Of course, this discovery raised a lot of questions. If the image was impressed into the shroud, how did it get there? Was it really Jesus who was wrapped in the shroud, or was it someone else? Unfortunately, Jackson was not able to answer these questions. However, he did provide some clues. He claimed that the image on the shroud was not created using any known technology. This means that the image could have been created using a supernatural event. Since Jackson's day, there have been many other scientists who have studied the shroud. They have used a variety of different methods to analyze the cloth, but their findings have been inconclusive. Some scientists believe that the image is real, while others insist that it's a fake. Ultimately, there is no consensus on what really happened to the shroud. However, there is one thing that we can all agree on. This is a truly remarkable artifact that has captured the imagination of people all over the world. Whether you believe that the shroud is real or fake, there's no denying that it is a fascinating piece of history. Now, it's time to hear from you. What do you think of the shroud? Do you believe that it's real? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you liked this video, please be sure to like it. Thanks for watching. See you next time. And one last thing before we go. If you're a fan of Bible Facts videos, be sure to check out my channel. I've been your host, and I'll see you next time. And remember, stay curious.